Sienna Tran is my name. Up until last quarter, I was the Technical Standards Coordinator at Archwell Diagnostics, a biotech company better known for its press releases than its employees. I'm 36 years old, and I live just outside of Boston. The front page did not feature me. Announcements made to the entire organization did not include me. I was the woman in charge of structuring regulatory paperwork and subtly making corrections to compliance reports prior to their submission to the FDA. The ones that folks sent in lowercase letters with ambiguous subject lines such as, "Need this fixed by EOD." At first, I didn't mind. The work was enjoyable to me. I enjoyed my invisibility. Being undervalued has a peculiar power, one that may be oppressive at times. The OncoScan white paper was the first. That's what broke me the most. 8 months had been spent gathering trial data, matching it to preclinical research, and double-checking each citation in our AI-powered pathology scan engine. I even contributed to the synopsis that described how OncoScan was helping pilot hospitals cut misdiagnoses by more than 30%. I created the submission's overall baseline structure. On my old ThinkPad with the broken spacebar, every figure and chart had been verified. I wasn't named on the day the white paper was made public. The author credits do not include this. The acknowledgments do not include this. No footnote at all. While browsing LinkedIn, I discovered this. The VP of Strategy was standing next to our head of product, Blake Mendenhall, who had just shared a picture of himself holding the report with the remark, "Proud to co-lead this groundbreaking milestone in AI-powered diagnostics." My hands became icy. I had already seen that picture background. I had given 3 iterations of the final document to the executive suite, and it was outside that room. Blake hadn't even answered my previous email. He presented it as if he had done it himself, after downloading the document, removing the metadata, and altering a few keywords. I refrained from crying. That evening, I simply sat at my kitchen table, took out the small antique typewriter that I had inherited from my grandfather and used to compose my undergraduate essays, and wrote 5 words on an old 4x6 card. "You know what you built." The following morning, I taped the card to the upper edge of my monitor. I refrained from screaming. I didn't break into anyone's workplace. I didn't complain about anything. A private folder opened, dubbed it Echo. I then began to gather everything, each and every original version, each and every Slack thread, each time-stamped email. I methodically, silently, and redundantly saved them. Not to cause harm to others, just in case you forgot, because I would give credit for the work if no one else did. I reverted to silence for weeks. I was still in charge of reviewing data integrity assertions and fixing broken citations. Now, though, I observed, listened, followed the credit trail. It was always floating up. Blake unexpectedly received an invitation to speak at a Toronto Diagnostics Summit. He used a word-for-word quote from the summary paragraph I produced. I am aware of this since I had it time-stamped 6 weeks prior to his finalization, and saved it in both Word and LaTeX. The fact that he took it wasn't the only thing that altered things. The reason was that he erased me so effortlessly, as if my name had never existed, as if I were a ghost typing in a cellar that was locked. I contacted Moroqi at that point. She was a biostatistician who collaborated with me on the design of the OncoScan trial when it was still a little brittle spreadsheet rather than a public marvel. Moroqi recalled. She also had emails. More significantly, she was upset. "He presented our model at the summit like he invented it," she wrote. "I literally had to correct him during Q&A. He didn't even know how the sensitivity rates were calculated. We cross-referenced our archives together. The merger followed. Archwell was pursuing HelixCore, a significant partner, large sum of money, worldwide growth. However, HelixCore had a serious due diligence staff. All IP-related publications, particularly those connected to regulatory filings, were to include proper attribution." The email arrived at that moment, from the legal department. The note reads, "Request for clarification. It concerned the OncoScan white paper's inconsistent authorship. All of a sudden, I was significant. Not because they thought I was important, because they feared the agreement would be broken. My participation in the call was requested to clarify the provenance of technical materials. Yes, I replied. I had receipts with me. I assumed the highlight would be the meeting. The silent disclosure, the icy facts on the table, and the awkward silence that followed your naming of what everyone else attempted to hide. However, something unexpected happened after that day. As I walked past them in the hallway, people began to pause, remained silent. Just a moment. It was as if their minds were catching up, as if they had only just realized that I had been there all along. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't alter my schedule. I continued to make my own coffee in the break room with the chipped countertop, and to eat the same sandwich I always brought from home for lunch outside by the loading dock. However, things were changing. I sensed it. Tectonic, but not visible or loud. The first person to speak it aloud was Monica. One afternoon, as she slid into the empty chair behind me, she remarked, "You know, it's funny to watch people act like they didn't know you were the backbone of half our systems." I chuckled to myself. The word for it is funny. Her voice was quieter as she leaned forward. "You cracked. An actual one. People took notice." That was what I wanted to think. I knew better, though. A culture is not altered by a single meeting. All it does is open a door, and I was aware that if I didn't take action to close the gap, they would quickly try to do it again. I therefore took an action that I had never taken before. For visibility, I offered my services. At first, it was little. I offered to guide new hires through our systems for documentation. I wanted them to see who really created the organization they were entering, not because I wanted to mentor them. I added the appropriate credits to internal wikis. Where applicable, I added shared authorship metadata to old files. Silently, exactly. Not a single declaration. No speeches. Then one day, I received an invitation. Not from my supervisor. From the guys at Helix Core. A transitional working group on IP transparency and attribution standards was what they wanted me to be a part of. My department had not been contacted. Recommended by internal audit. Read the invitation. I didn't show anyone the email. I simply agreed, set up time on my schedule, and got ready. The initial meeting took place virtually. 3 senior integration leads were present, including Rena. The only person on the call without the titles Director or VP in their title was me. They treated me like a note-taker at first. They were asking me how to build their internal version histories after our heritage structure at the end of the hour. The labor wasn't the only thing involved. Trust was at issue. I didn't hold myself up. I didn't spin. I just stated the facts, clean, unadorned, and sourced. In such rooms, it turns out to be more uncommon than I had assumed. I was invited to 2 additional integration meetings the following week. Blake made an attempt to speak with me at that point. The elevator was where it was. Between floors, just the 2 of us. Like a teenager caught cheating on an exam, he moved from foot to foot. "Sienna," he uttered softly. All I wanted to say was, I didn't intend for things to become untidy. I didn't answer. Not immediately. I turned a little when the elevator on floor 7 dinged. I said, "Messy would have been better." Human mistake is what messy means. You cleaned. You deliberately erased me. He flinched. I didn't believe it would make a difference. "Blake, that's the issue," I replied as I left. "You didn't think I was important." On his face, the door shut. I didn't feel victorious. I was elated. Declaring the truth aloud has a subtle yet potent effect. Echo is not necessary. All it must do is stand. By Friday, my name had been added retrospectively to the OncoScan paper's internal contributor credits following a metadata correction that legal had logged. No remarks in public. Don't apologize. Simply being there. And it was sufficient. For the time being. Before long, the corrections ceased to seem like victories. Yes, it did matter at first, to have my name subtly added to the version history of things I had created, as if the world had shifted back into position. However, acknowledgement is not a cure. It's merely recognition. And I noticed more flaws, the more I was included in the Helix Core integration team. Erasure wasn't a coincidence at Archwell. A system existed. We weren't meant to be remembered in the first place, so people like me didn't get forgotten. It manifested in little ways, such as who was given budget control, and who was invited to vision meetings and told to stay looped in, and whose modifications were frozen. I witnessed complete processes that had been developed by technicians, coordinators, and assistants, and all the credit was given to someone whose role it was to talk, not to execute. Helix Core was unique. Vigilant, but not flawless. They had procedures in place for data integrity reports linked to particular contributor IDs, authorship tracking, and feedback ownership. It was tight and clinical. However, they were lacking in context, human memory, the lengthy tale of the person who kept everything together while it was all coming apart. That's where I came in handy. I was able to recall things. I was in possession of receipts. More than that, though I had names. I discovered a problem with the architecture logs one afternoon while assisting in the cleanup of the technical transfer documentation for a legacy oncology platform. A sizable portion of unrecorded design changes from 2019 were present. Although Blake's name appeared on the final sign-off, his writing style did not align with the intricate reasoning. I looked a little further. An ancient text document with the author tag Roman Offgridev was discovered in an archived directory. Roman Lena. Early in 2020, a software engineer discreetly departed. She once showed me how to turn internal XML into visual flow diagrams in 5 minutes flat, which is why I remembered her. She wasn't ostentatious. She did nothing but work. Hard. I made contact. Did you construct the diagnostic trigger engine's logic path in 2019? I typed. After 2 minutes, yes. Why? Because it's being merged. Without acknowledgement. The following day, she gave me a call. Don't text. No email. Just a straight call. She didn't even say hello before saying, I can't believe they're still pulling this. In my 3rd trimester, I constructed that engine. Blake assured me that the V3 paperwork would give me credit. Then came the layoffs. I was unable to download my own files at all. After a moment of stillness, I replied, I still have them. And I did. The preliminary drafts, the chain of approval, the commits. IT had moved them to read-only servers prior to our cloud migration, and they were hidden deep within a shared development folder. However, I had taken a regular compliance snapshot and archived the folder structure. I had no idea why I had kept it. I did now. For 2 nights in a row, we worked together. She supported her contribution by rebuilding the chronology, confirming the commits, and obtaining internal meeting logs. The Helix Core audit team didn't even bat an eye when we sent it to them as part of a request for documentation correction. Confirmed. Updated appropriately. The email said, no cheers, no confetti, because someone pushed the system was only nudged in the direction of truth. No meeting I had ever been asked to had the same significance as that moment, that correction. It demonstrated I wasn't alone, not because it helped me. We numbered in the dozens. Individuals who had constructed frameworks, tidied up code bases, revised summaries, and fixed malfunctioning models, all without ever being mentioned in the narrative. I began to gather names. Not on a list of grand justices. Only a spreadsheet. A silent map of the real person who forced Archwell to flee. Then I suggested something. Not to human resources. Not too lawful. To Helix Core. A long-term program. Attribution that is embedded. A workgroup that creates traceable paths of contribution and audits documentation for legacy products. Not only for activities involving the public, but also for internal systems. With access to previous metadata snapshots, contribution labeling opt-in interviews, and retroactive authorship logs. Not a major campaign. No allyship that is performative. Only responsibility. Incorporated into the system's framework. They gave their approval. Silently. In the same manner that they had welcomed me. Not because I was demanding room, but because I was aware of the location of the missing parts. As I had intended, the embedded attribution software launched in the background. Not a banner. No town halls. Only a new shared folder for documentation requests, and a silent line item in the integration update decks. However many took notice. Not those with strategy in their titles, not the ones that make a lot of noise. The silent ones. They began dropping by my desk, with old manuscripts, sticky notes, and inquiries such as, "Do you think this counts?" or, "I don't know if I'm allowed to share it, but I found a copy of the original toolset in my inbox." They were hesitant. Be cautious. As though someone has yet to pull the rug out from under them. It infuriated me, not in front of them. At the society that trained them to vanish even after doing everything correctly. I kept a journal. Years ago, I purchased a basic softcover book from the school bookstore. I jotted down old version numbers, names, dates, and snippets of emails. To keep people safe, not to expose them. Evidence of their presence that they had been important. After 3 weeks, I received an unexpected invitation. Closed leadership roundtable. Internal candidate evaluation. The Helix Core Transition Office sent the calendar hold. No plans, only a time block, 2 hours, executive level. I nearly said no. I didn't want to belong in that room, not because I didn't belong. The one where people like myself were considered background noise, unless they carried a fire, where titles were more important than timelines, and where ideas were packaged. However, I went, because someone else would if I didn't. I was also aware of how the incorrect names got into the correct folders. When I got to the conference room, it was silent. Not silent, but not empty. There are 6 persons seated at the table. Everything is polished and Helix Core. Then Rena, was present. She nodded slightly, barely perceptibly, as if to acknowledge our starting point. The man at the head of the table, acting head of integration, Elliot Crane, remarked, "Thanks for joining Sienna. Once the merger is complete, we'll be evaluating internal candidates for permanent positions. Your name was mentioned, several times." I blinked. He went on. "We need someone to spearhead a new project that involves historical attribution, workforce documentation, coherence, and cross-departmental IP openness. Designing policies, working with internal audit, and implementing mentorship programs for teams in North America and the EU would all be part of it." I kept quiet. "Next, what would the title be?" He grinned. "Knowledge Integrity Director." It was a lovely title. Tidy, heavy, honorable. I detested it. I was aware of the consequences, not because it was inaccurate. The gatherings, the political situation. There in which, when you enter a room, people cease talking freely. The notion that even if you constructed the floor, they are standing on you, are now one of them. With caution, I said, "I need time." "Obviously," he answered. Rena caught me by the elevators after the meeting. "Why does it seem like you're going to decline that?" Softly, she asked. I gave a shrug. "Because this wasn't something I did for a title." "You did not," she remarked. "But we need you in it for precisely that reason." I didn't respond. Then no. That evening, I went home and took out the old typewriter once more. 3 words were typed on a blank card. Avoid becoming like them. After Blake stole my work, I typed the first card and pinned it next to it. You are aware of what you have constructed. Avoid becoming like them. I had both cards in my pocket when I entered the HR department the following day. I replied, "I'll take the job, but only under 3 restrictions. Their eyebrows went up. 1, I added. I pick my own squad. No appointments. No reshuffled individuals attempting to regain their prominence. 2. The initiative for embedded attribution remains decentralized. History cannot be preserved by anyone. And 3. The executive roster does not include the title. Blinking, the HR director said, "You'd rather not have it listed. Power, not aesthetics, is what I want." A long silence. "We can make that work," follows. I am now officially a director. I don't sit on the 21st floor, though. An executive assistant is not something I have. I'm not flown to summit meals with lanyards that match. I do, however, have a whiteboard filled with names, some from 5 years ago and some from last week. People who created the backbone are no longer erased by my system, and in the same hallway where I began, I have a peaceful office. Someone put a note on my desk last Friday. No name. Only a sticky blue ink handwritten message. I documented everything because of you. I adhered it to my notebook's back. No speeches. Not a word. Just another piece of evidence that given enough weight, silence may create structure. Being noticed has a peculiar quality. Not exactly in the spotlight. Not the stage of a conference, or the look at our incredible team type of recognition. I mean the cautious, slow kind. The kind where you have to wait for someone to use your name. Where someone genuinely asks, "Hey, did you build this?" before clicking send, and where they check the version history twice. It began to occur more frequently. One morning, I was contacted by a Warsaw data lead who said, "I discovered an old protocol draft with your markup. I was just curious if I should stick to the new version or yours." The following email was sent by a junior compliance analyst in Chicago. "Do you have the audit log from Q3 2021? You may know where the clean one resides, I've heard." I was even asked to proofread a disclosure statement by a legal representative to ensure that the wording felt truthful. I paused at that one. Not that I wasn't capable. However, truth had never been their specialty. "Yes," I replied. And I began to say yes more often. I now had the ability to disperse the weight, not because I wanted to bear it myself, to facilitate the system for future users like me, the person who continues to keep drafts that no one requested in case the actual tale is needed at a later time. Slowly, the office altered. When I walked in, the silence in the meeting room stopped. Not quiet, but not performatively loud. Names were once again printed on shared documents, listing authors rather than only reviewers. Before reporting it up, the chain managers questioned their colleagues about who actually created the workflow. Blake, too. He went out. Not in a scandalous way, not with embarrassment, only a silent resignation and a LinkedIn post that used phrases like exploring new ventures and transition. Nobody asked me what I thought. I made no offer. In actuality, he was never the issue. Not on his own. He was merely the most obvious sign of a society that values appearance above content. And when one individual goes, those processes don't fall apart. They simply change form, unless the plans are altered. And I had been doing just that. Silently. Each day, Core Memory is a new internal project that I began. It wasn't ostentatious. Retrieving legacy contributions from the shadows was merely a cross-functional archival endeavor. We identified version inconsistencies, matched original writers to early prototypes, and encouraged current team members to get in touch with their predecessors. COVID-19 engineers who left. Prior to the merger, analysts were let go. The names of lab technicians who had been hidden in backup folders called MISC docs. Responses weren't always received, but occasionally we did. For example, the original sensitivity index estimates for our early lung screening model were mailed in a handwritten notebook by a now retired technician named Gerald. Or the morning that Lena. Yes, that Lena sent me a single line via email. "I no longer harbor resentment. Thank you. I was hit harder than anything by that one. because that's what all of this was about. Not revenge. Not a correction. Repair. I discovered something surprising last week. Physical files from our previous location, years before the cloud switch, were in the lowest drawer of the documentation repository, which I was clearing away. Things that most people didn't know existed. There was a file folder with the name Sienna Working Refs Keep inside. Printouts of my first regulatory drafts are included. Underlined, noted, dated. A sticky note with the following words on top. Retain these. She notices what we overlook. No signature was present, no initials. However, the handwriting my first manager was that one. The one who departed in 2018 when funding was eliminated. She didn't say much. However, she must have seen at that time that I was creating something valuable. I held that folder in both hands as I sat there for a while. Perhaps we're never truly invisible, I thought. Perhaps the appropriate folks are just noticing us too late. Or perhaps when we stay long enough to change the rules, we turn into the correct people. Like I always do, I entered the office this morning, identical coat, the same coffee cup, the same plush shoes that don't make noise in the corridors. However, something had changed. The door was held open for me by someone from strategy. I was requested to spend a few minutes going over a file attribution map by a new employee. Additionally, a letter was written on a square of paper that was tucked behind my keyboard when I sat down at my desk. You created space for me and others like me. No name, no signature, just evidence. To be honest, I don't require anything more, because I'll stick with that version. The one in which I did more than simply endure the quiet. I revised it.